two little tablets.
Okay. Misha Nishba. Sorry. Misha Nishba shelo yechelam klum. When a person takes an oath that he will not eat anything on that day, and he ate less than an olive-sized portion of food, in other words, less than a kazayas, he is not liable. Now, to be very clear, whenever in halach it says you are not liable, it does not mean it's permitted. In fact, when it says you are not liable, what it means to say is it's prohibited, but you're not liable for punishment. Why? Because it was less than the minimum requirement. For eating does not involve a quantity less than an olive-sized portion. It is as if he partook of less than the minimum measure of a nevela, a treifa, or the like. So, for example, are you allowed to eat that on Yom Kippur? Less than an olive-sized portion? Definitely not. However, if a person is sick or a woman is pregnant, etc., and they want to minimize the extent, the severity of their transgression, if you eat less than these minimum requirements, you're not liable for punishment, so you're minimizing the extent of its transgression. If he said, I'm taking an oath that I will not eat the substance, okay, so he says, I will not eat this thing, and he ate it, he is liable even if the substance concerning which he took the oath is one mustard seed or smaller. In other words, the most minuscule amount, he would be liable. What's the difference? When he took the oath here at the beginning, he says, I will not eat anything. Eating anything on this day means a minimum amount. But if he says, I won't eat, and if he doesn't meet that threshold, he hasn't transgressed. He hasn't broken his word. But when he says, I won't eat this substance, then the smallest amount of it would be liable for punishment. He took an oath that he wouldn't taste anything, and he partook of even the smallest amount of food, he is liable. Because tasting can be the smallest amount. When a person takes an oath that he will not eat on a specific day, and he drinks, he is liable because of the prohibition against eating includes drinking, and therefore, if he both ate and drank, he is liable only for one set of lashes, if he acted willfully, or one sin offering if he transgressed inadvertently. So either way, the punishment or the consequence that he is liable for would include both. Dalit. When a person took an oath not to drink on a given day, he is permitted to eat, because the prohibition against drinking doesn't include eating, so it doesn't work both ways. How much must he drink in order to be liable? It appears to me that he is not liable unless he drinks a revius, as is the case with regard to other prohibitions. And he gives here, it says a fourth of a lug. I think it's about 2.5 ounces. When a person takes an oath that he will not eat on a particular day, and he partakes of many types of foods, or he takes an oath that he will not drink on a particular day and partakes of many types of beverages, he is only liable once. Even if he said, I'm taking an oath today that I will not eat meat, bread, or beans, and he ate all of them, he is only liable once for all of them, so that makes it easier. But on the other hand, all of the foods can be joined together to reach the measure of an olive-sized portion. So if he ate the third of the size of an olive of bread, and the third of the size of an olive of meat, and the third of the size of an olive of beans, he is liable for everything altogether. When a person takes an oath that he will neither eat nor drink, and then eats and drinks, he is liable twice. Although drinking is including in eating. Since he specifically said that I will not drink, he revealed his intention not to include drinking and eating. Thus, it is as if he took an oath on this independently and this independently, and therefore he is liable twice. Sorry. Okay, so although drinking in theory is included in eating, when he specifies them separately, they then take on independent liabilities. Similarly, if a person said, I am taking an oath that I will not eat bread from wheat, bread from barley, or bread from buckwheat, he is liable for each one individually if he partakes of them. He mentioned bread 3 times to make a decision and causes him to be liable for each one individually. Okay. Now, what do you do if you have a nudnik on your case? The following laws apply when a person's colleague was persistently imploring him to eat at his home, telling him, come and drink with me wine, milk, and honey. If he answers and says, I'm taking oath that I will not drink wine, milk, and honey, he is liable for each one individually if he partakes of them. To be liable only once, he should have said, I'm taking an oath, I will not drink anything, or that I will not drink what you said. But since he repeated the phrase stating each one individually, he revealed his intention that he obligated himself with an oath for each and every type of beverage individually. And therefore, the beverages are not combined with each other to reach the minimum measure. And the person is liable only when he eats the minimum measure for each one individually. And since a sin offering is required for each one individually, they are like fat and blood, which cannot be combined for the measure of an olive-sized portion, as explained in Hilchis Machalis Asuris. Okay. Tess. When one says, I'm taking an oath that I will not eat this loaf, or that I will not eat it. Once he eats an olive-sized portion of it, he is liable. And if he says, I am taking an oath that I will not eat it up, he is not liable until he eats the entire loaf. Okay, when he says, I won't eat the whole thing, basically. If he says, I'm taking an oath that I will not eat this oath, and then he adds an oath that I will not eat it up, should he eat it, he is liable only once, because obviously eating all of it is included in eating part of it. Yud. Any questions? Similarly, he said, I am taking an oath that I will not eat today. And then he took an oath concerning the loaf that he would not eat it up. Even though he eats the entire loaf that day, he is not liable. Only once. And similar laws apply in all analogous situations. In other words, if one oath is included in the other, then it swallows, so to speak, the liability of the lesser oath. The rationale is that an oath does not take an effect when another is already in effect. Okay. However, that's only when you make the bigger oath first. If, however, one took an oath that he would not eat up a loaf, and afterwards took an oath that he would not eat anything, that he would not eat this entire loaf, eat from this loaf, he is liable twice. The rationale is that at the time he took the oath that he would not eat it up, he wouldn't be liable unless he ate the entire loaf. Thus, when he took a second oath that he would not eat anything, or that he would not eat anything of the loaf, he is liable for the latter oath when he eats an olive-sized portion. So as soon as he took the first bite of bread, he broke his second oath, the lesser oath, and when he eats the entire loaf, he is liable for his first oath. So the inclusion of one oath in the other is only if it is in a successive order. When a person, takes an oath not to eat figs and afterwards takes an oath not to eat figs and grapes, he is liable twice for eating figs. The rationale is that he included the figs which were forbidden in the first oath with grapes that were permitted. And since the second oath took effect with regard to the grapes, it also took effect with regard to the figs and becomes liable for two oaths, as we explained in Hilchis Machalis Asuris. In other words, when the second oath comes into effect because of a separate clause in it, then its first inclusive clause comes into effect as well, though it would have theoretically been included in an earlier oath. Yud Beis. If one said, I'm taking an oath that I will not eat 8 of this item, an oath that I will not eat 9, oath that I will not eat 10, he is liable only once, whether he ate 8, 9, or 10. In other words, for quantity, it will not make a difference. However, if one said, I am taking an oath that I will not eat 10, an oath that I will not eat 9, an oath that I will not eat 8, if he eats 10, he is liable 3 times, 1 for each oath. And similarly, if he eats 9, he is liable twice. If he eats 8, he is liable once. In other words, because the oaths became less and less. In other words, when the oath is growing, the growth is already inclusive in the lower level. But when the oath is shrinking, as it shrinks, it takes on newer and newer dimensions. The following rules apply when a person says, I am taking an oath and I will not eat figs. Then he takes another oath to not eat figs and dates together. If he forgot, ate figs, and set aside a sacrifice, and afterwards forgot and ate grapes, he is not liable for the grapes. And the rationale is, this is like half the measure for which one is liable, and the one does not bring a sacrifice for half the measure. In other words, it would not be included the separate types of fruit. Tesvav. Similar laws apply if one took an oath that he would not eat 10, and then took an oath that he would not eat 10 and 9. If he ate 10, separated a sacrifice, and then forgot and ate 9, this is like half the measure, and one doesn't bring a sacrifice for half the measure for the final oath concerned not eating 9. Excuse me, 19. And because he never ate 19 during one period of a sacrifice, he's not liable. 16. When a person says, I'm taking an oath that I will not eat this large loaf if I eat this small loaf. If he forgets the stipulation when he eats the small loaf and afterwards willfully eats the larger loaf, he is liable for lashes. In other words, even though he did not have intent when he activated the oath through his consumption of the smaller loaf, even if the intent was not consciously there, the liability still comes into play. If he ate the small one while he remembered the stipulation and knew that by eating it, the larger one would become forbidden, and then forgot and ate the larger one while thinking that it was not forbidden, yet he is exempt. If he ate both of them unintentionally, he is exempt, and if he ate them both willfully, he is liable, regardless of whether he ate the larger one first or last. Similarly, if he made the two loaves dependent on each other, taking an oath saying, I'm taking an oath that I will not eat one of these loaves if I eat the other. If he forgot the stipulation and ate one of them, and then willfully ate the other, he is liable. Okay, so similar principle that the activation through meeting the conditions through which the oath comes into play do not have to be conscious. 19, if he ate the first one willfully, but the second one inadvertently, so when he made the transgression, he didn't have intention. If he ate them both willfully, he is exempt. Okay, so if the transgression was inadvertent, he is exempt. Obviously, if he ate them both willfully, then of course he is liable. Chaf, when a person says, I'm taking an oath that I will eat this loaf today, and the day passes without him eating it, should he have acted unintentionally, he must bring an adjustable guilt offering, carbon oil of v'yodid. In other words, carbon oil of v'yodid is a carbon that depends on what I did. I'm not sure what I did. If he acted willfully, he is not liable for lashes because he did not perform a deed, even though he violated the prohibition against taking a false oath. Chaf Aleph. Why is a person who took an oath that he ate liable for lashes if he did not eat? And one who took an oath that he did not eat liable if he did eat, even though he did not perform a deed? Because at the time he took the oath, he was taking a false oath. If, however, a person takes an oath that he will perform a particular activity, it is not a false oath at the time it was taken. Okay, and the reason for this is that you have to do a maise in order to be liable. And this person basically did not do a maise, an action. 22. The following law applies when a person tells a colleague, I'm taking an oath that I will not eat at your home. Or his colleague was consistently imploring him to eat at his home and he refuses. If he takes an oath and he says, my oath will take effect if I eat at your home, or if he says there will be no oath if I deny it at your home, these all bring about prohibitions. In other words, it is considered that he took an oath that he would not eat at his friend's home. But if he used all of these expressions together to give these different forms of an oath that he's not going to eat there, and he transgressed and ate, he is still only liable once for that. Any questions?
Rabbi, when we say he's liable, and presumably liable for lashes, I presume that needs witnesses and warnings.
Of course. Like everything. Definitely needs lashes. Excuse me, needs witnesses. Warnings and all that, of course. That?
Sorry, Rabbi. I went off by mistake.
Okay. Did you have a question?
No, I just didn't want to unmute when I said thank you. So I was testing it and then it unmuted by itself.
Very well. Have a beautiful Shabbos, everyone.
Thanks, Rabbi. Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Shabbat shalom.